SpaceX has revealed the full plan for Starship Flight 12, and this one is not just another test. It is the first full flight of the V3 generation. That means a new ship, a new booster, and a new pad campaign. The vehicle standing at Starbase is larger, stronger, and more instrumented than before. Flight 12 is designed to prove that the upgraded system can survive the whole sequence. The mission begins at Pad 2, the newest launch site built for Starship operations. The tower, the arms, and the ground systems are all part of the test. This is not only a rocket launch. It is a test of the factory, the pad, the engines, the ship, and the recovery plan. For viewers, the headline is simple. Starship V3 is finally going to fly. For engineers, the real question is deeper. Can the new version turn Starship from an experimental rocket into a repeatable transportation system? The pad itself is one of the biggest changes. Pad 2 is built around lessons learned from earlier Starship flights. It has to handle more thrust, more heat, and faster turnaround goals. The tower arms do more than hold hardware. They represent the future catch system SpaceX eventually wants to rely on. For Flight 12, the pad campaign is about proving that the ground side is ready. A vehicle can fail because of its engines. It can also fail because the pad cannot feed it correctly. Cryogenic methane and oxygen move through the ground system like a frozen bloodstream. If loading is unstable, the flight is already compromised. That is why the rehearsal matters. Before a launch, SpaceX wants the entire stack to behave like it is already flying. Under the booster, the real violence is hidden inside the engine bay. Booster 19 carries the upgraded Raptor 3 generation. The goal is more thrust, fewer external parts, and a cleaner engine layout. That matters because complexity is the enemy of reuse. Every exposed pipe is a possible failure point. Every simplified line is one less thing to inspect after flight. Flight 12 is the first time this complete V3 booster architecture flies. The engine startup sequence has to be clean. The thrust has to build evenly. The structure has to survive the acoustic load. The pad has to survive the exhaust. The flight computer must decide in seconds whether the vehicle is healthy. V3 is not just a cosmetic update. The new Starship is taller and designed around a more mature operating model. It carries changes to tanks, structures, thermal protection, and flight hardware. The booster also changes, including the grid fin layout. The shift to 3 grid fins is more than a visual detail. It reflects a new balance between control, mass, heating, and recovery strategy. A reusable booster does not need to be pretty. It needs to return predictably. The ship has a different challenge. It has to survive ascent, coast, re-entry, and splashdown. That means the heat shield becomes the star of the mission. Flight 12 is partly a launch test. Inside mission control, Flight 12 starts long before ignition. The first job is not speed. The first job is discipline. Teams watch tank pressure, engine chill, weather, range status, and ground hardware. The countdown is a controlled collapse of thousands of checks into one moment. Every system has to agree. The vehicle must be fueled. The pad must be clear. The flight termination system must be ready. The engines must be cold enough to start cleanly. The guidance system must know where the rocket is and where it must go. At this scale, a small issue can stop the launch. At ignition, the mission changes from planning to physics. The booster engines build thrust under the full stack. For a brief moment, the rocket is still restrained. Then the hold down releases. Starship rises through its own exhaust cloud. The tower disappears behind steam, dust, and flame. The vehicle clears the pad and begins pitching downrange. This is where the first part of the plan becomes visible. Flight 12 follows a familiar test profile, but with unfamiliar hardware. The vehicle must prove it can handle the same mission with a new architecture. The ascent is watched for engine stability. It is watched for attitude control. As Starship climbs, aerodynamic pressure builds. The vehicle enters the region known as maximum dynamic pressure. This is where speed and atmosphere combine into the hardest push on the structure. The rocket does not have to look stressed to be under stress. Loads move through the tanks, flaps, grid fins, and inner stage. The engines keep firing while the atmosphere thins. For V3, this is a major structural exam. New hardware is being asked to behave under real flight loads. Ground tests can simulate parts of this. Only flight can combine all of it at once. If the vehicle stays stable, confidence rises. If it drifts, the guidance system has to correct immediately. Hot staging is one of the most dramatic parts of the Starship profile. Instead of separating cold, the upper stage begins its engine sequence during staging. The ship pulls away while the booster transitions to its own return plan. For Flight 12, this moment tests both vehicles at once. The ship must ignite cleanly. The booster must survive the staging environment. The control systems must separate two massive machines without losing attitude. The interstage region takes a brutal thermal and acoustic hit. The new V3 hardware has to manage that hit. If staging works, the ship continues towards space. If staging is unstable, the entire mission can end in seconds. This is why SpaceX keeps repeating test profiles. The booster is now falling back toward its own test objective. It has to rotate, manage propellant, restart engines, and target a landing zone. For future Starship operations, this is the path toward rapid reuse. A booster that cannot return is not the final version of the system. Flight 12 is not about catching the booster at the tower. It is about proving the new booster can fly the return profile cleanly. The 3-grid fin layout now becomes important. The booster has to steer through thinner air with precision. It falls tail first, using its body and fins like control surfaces. Then engines relight for the landing burn. The vehicle slows violently. Fuel sloshes inside giant tanks. While the booster returns, Ship 39 keeps climbing. The upper stage reaches a long coast phase above Earth. This is where Flight 12 does something especially important. The ship gets time to observe itself. Cameras and sensors can study surfaces that were hidden during ascent. Heat shield regions can be checked before re-entry. Flaps can be monitored in clean sunlight. The payload bay and exterior hardware can be seen under orbital lighting. This matters because Starship is supposed to become reusable. A reusable vehicle must know its own condition before returning. Airliners inspect themselves with sensors. Starship needs the same idea at a far more violent scale. Another major part of the plan involves the payload bay. SpaceX wants Starship to carry huge payloads to orbit. For this flight, the payload demonstration is about deployment mechanics. A satellite simulator gives the team a controlled test target. The question is not whether Starship can carry mass. The question is whether it can deploy payloads smoothly in flight. The bay door has to open correctly. The internal hardware has to move without jamming. The payload has to exit without striking the vehicle. The ship has to maintain attitude while the sequence runs. This is a small demonstration with a large implication. Future Starlink V3 deployments depend on a reliable bay system. The full Flight 12 plan is easier to understand as a chain. First, prove the new pad can support the stack. Second, prove the Raptor 3 booster can lift cleanly. Third, prove staging works with the new architecture. Fourth, prove the booster return profile remains controllable. Fifth, prove the ship can coast, inspect itself, and handle payload operations. Sixth, prove the ship can survive re-entry with upgraded thermal protection. Seventh, recover enough data to improve Flight 13. Each link is useful by itself. Together, they reveal SpaceX's actual strategy. Do not wait for a perfect rocket. Fly the best version available? Re-entry is the most dangerous chapter for Ship 39. The vehicle is huge, stainless, and covered with thermal protection tiles. During re-entry, air becomes plasma around the ship. The heat shield has to protect the structure underneath. The flaps have to move inside a violent flow field. The guidance system has to hold attitude while the atmosphere thickens. Every tile is a small part of a much larger shield. Missing tiles can reveal how much margin the design really has. Cracked tiles can show where stress concentrates. Uneven heating can expose weak regions. That is why self-inspection before re-entry matters. SpaceX wants to connect what the ship sees in space with what happens in plasma. Starship's re-entry is not like a capsule. It uses its broad body to bleed off speed. The ship falls belly first through the atmosphere. Its flaps act like control surfaces on a giant steel skydiver. For V3, this is a crucial proof point. The ship has to stay stable while the air gets denser. Too much angle can increase heating. Too little control can ruin the descent profile. The vehicle must balance drag, lift, heating, and attitude. This is the kind of flight regime no ground stand can fully reproduce. Only reentry can test reentry. The cameras watch the vehicle. The final phase is splashdown. For this test, the ocean is the landing site. That may look less impressive than a tower catch, but it is exactly what the plan needs. The vehicle has to reach the right zone. It has to remain controllable deep into descent. It has to execute the final burn or terminal maneuver as planned. If the ship breaks apart too early, the data ends early. If it survives too long, engineers get a complete story. The splashdown zone becomes the final instrument. Aircraft and ships can observe the event. Telemetry can compare prediction to reality. After the flight, the most important work happens indoors. Engineers compare prediction with reality. They examine engine data from ascent. They examine booster steering during descent. They examine payload bay timing. They examine camera views of the heat shield. They examine re-entry temperatures. They examine where the ship survived and where it struggled. This is where Flight 12 becomes Flight 13. A successful flight does not mean the vehicle is finished. A failed section does not mean the program failed. The point is to turn unknowns into engineering tasks. Flight 12 is important because it points beyond itself. If V3 works, SpaceX gets closer to frequent Starship flights. Frequent flights are the real goal. A single Starship launch is impressive. A fleet of reusable Starships changes the economics of orbit. Starlink V3 needs massive launch capacity. Lunar missions need orbital refilling. Mars plans need a vehicle that can fly repeatedly. All of that depends on boring reliability. Engines have to restart. Tiles have to survive. Payload doors have to open. The most interesting part of Flight 12 is not the fireball possibility. It is the checklist behind the spectacle. New pad, new booster, new ship, new engines, new inspection strategy, new payload demonstration, new re-entry data. Every one of those pieces can move the program forward. Everyone can also expose a weakness. That is the complete plan behind Starship Flight 12.